Hey, Laura.
Hello.
All right, so we have discussed Trojans, but we haven't discussed the components that make up a Trojan. Now, one of the most common forms of Trojans today is known as a remote access Trojan, or RAT for short. The RAT is often made up of three separate and very independent components. So for an example, we'll focus on a remote access Trojan called Apocalypse. Don't you just love these names that come up with? The server is the malicious code that will run on the infected computer. And with this Trojan, the server is actually on the victim, not on the attacker. The client is the program that the attacker will run in order to control the server. The data is then shared between, as you can imagine, the client and the server.
There is also a program used to build the server and customize it for specific use the hacker has in mind. He may just be changing the port that the server will listen on and establishing the registry keys that need to be configured. He may even be setting up a method of encrypting the traffic between the client and server. These are many ways for a hacker to customize these programs to fit his or her needs and to evade common countermeasures.
All right, so in this demonstration, we're going to take a look at a known Trojan that has been on the market for some time. You may have heard of it. It's called Dark Comet. Now, this is a RAT Trojan, which means Remote Administration Trojan or Remote Access Trojan, depending on the author. Now, this Trojan has been available on the market for a couple of years. We're going to navigate to the folder where we have saved this Trojan. Now, it's interesting that the government of Syria has even made use of this Trojan to monitor and spy on its own citizens. So because of this, the author of this Trojan has decided to no longer make it available to the general public and has placed on his website a removal tool to aid in the removal of this Trojan. So good process there. So even the hackers don't like government spying. Crazy. So if you recall, the RAT Trojans are made up of more than one component. So let's start here by double-clicking on the client. So keep in mind that the client is what the hacker uses to connect to the server, which would be on the victim's computer. The client is not the executable that will run on the victim's machine. It is instead the interface that the hacker will be using to monitor your system. And of course, the server is the executable that is sent to the victim with maybe a Word document, a picture, some other kind of file, even a movie to infect that system. So let's not get confused here. The client is the tool that the attacker uses to create or edit the server that is going to be sent to the victim. So moving on, let's go ahead and click on the Edit Server and select Server Module. Now, we are not going to go through every single setting available on this Trojan, just those specific settings that are necessary in order to make this executable work on the victim's system. So you can see here, we can go ahead and set the password for this particular server. We can change the mutation code, and we can also have set up the server ID so that it matches the system we are controlling with these servers. So got that all set up. Let's take a look at the network settings. Now notice here we're using a local loopback IP address 127, the 0.0.1. And we are doing this so that we do not risk this Trojan infecting anything else on the network. We do also have this virtual machine, as you can see, isolated. So even if we did set a different IP address, it would not go anywhere. That VM is safe. Now, what you would do is an attacker is put in the public IP address, or yourself as the attacker, where the controller will sit so that the server, once deployed, will connect back to your system. Now, remember, a hacker is not going to send out his public IP address. That would be suicide. That would be traceable. But instead, he would utilize either a dynamic DNS that will change the IP address randomly or multiple proxy servers set up around the globe, like we see in the movies sometimes. So for the sake of this presentation, we will just use the local IP address and go ahead and test the connection to verify that it is working. And we can see that it is. So good. Next, we click to add the configure RAT IN or configuration. The system does not or works on a port 1604, and if we turn to the main interface and click on listen, we can see the 1604 port, and of course we can change that to any port that we see fit. And yes, a hacker would not likely use the default port, so just remember that. In many cases, we will utilize a standard port that is open on almost every network, and that would be port 80 or 443 or sometimes even 8080. Let's drop down here. We'll take a look at the module startup. I'm going to go ahead and enable that. We also have to choose an install path, and this just depends upon, again, where or how you believe this will be on the high, this Trojan from the victim. So in this example, we will choose a System32 install path. Then of course we have to have an install name, and you can see what will appear is the Win Update exe, and of course you can change that as well. So keep in mind, it is always a good idea to use something identical to or similar to existing services that would be running so that you can hide or more easily hide this Trojan. And in this example, the install name is Win Updater, which is not very suspicious. It's pretty ubiquitous, especially to general users. Now, notice here at the bottom that I can add some attributes to the server. I could make this install hidden or make it a system file. I can even archive it or make it temporary, and last but not least, we can have the option to make it a read-only file. So you can see we have complete and full control of the executable. Another item is quite important is the file creation date. We would expect this date to match the date of some file updates as they occur on a regular basis, and it's very easy really for a hacker to find out when these updates are happening. Again, another way to hide. So now we all know that with today's operating systems, during install, you are always going to get some type of a message from the operating system. So in this case, we can actually display that message we want the victim to see. It's pretty sinister. We could provide an error message or an information message, anything we want. Now, in this case, we will choose error message. And we would not recommend that you would leave Dark Comet as the title, as that might cause a little suspicion, as you can imagine. The skin, a type in something a little out of the ordinary. However, a hacker would generally mimic an exact error message that you would expect from Microsoft. Something that we would all expect maybe. So as you can see, we can type in a coded message that would be very similar to something you may see from Microsoft during an actual error. So moving down to the module shield, this Trojan does have a stealth and persistent function. You can hide itself in a 32-bit operating system. Notice here we can make this very hard to kill if we select active persistent process. And then we can also disable system functions such as Task Manager, Registry Editor, the Windows Firewall, even the User Account Control. And here for Windows XP Service Pack 2 and older has some additional capabilities. All right, so then we've moved down to Keylogger, and yes, we can actually activate offline Keylogger, have it send the logs to an FTP. In which case, we would simply enter the FTP, get on that site, and we are utilizing, and we can store this data and see it. Now, a hacker will generally use an anonymous FTP they have found somewhere on the internet, something that can't be traced back to them. All of this data is encrypted, so it is not likely that even if this Trojan is found, that they will actually find the settings. And we can also test connectivity prior to sending this. We can edit the hosts file on the victim machine if we need to. We can also choose the icon that we would like to be displayed for this particular Trojan. We have complete and total control over look and feel. So let's click on the custom icon here, and then we're going to move down, find an icon that might be suitable for what we're doing, something that would make sense to the user. I'm going to select the movie icon. We all see it. We all use it. Now notice we can also select a custom icon path and choose an icon somewhere else on our system. I can also add plugins. I can also bind this executable to another file on the system. A lot of functionality here. So since I chose here the movie icon, we should probably bind this with an actual movie or a video. It would make sense. So I'm going to find here the sample video, select this free wildlife video, running animals and such. So now that we have the sample video that we're going to bind to our executable, we can choose to drop and executes, which means that it would run as a standalone service. And if the victim is using something as simple as TCP view, they would be able to see the port and that our executable is running on that port. Whereas if we choose to inject resource to explore it, will then run as the Explorer service and at least two of the victims viewing, and this is what I prefer to do. So click on Add File. Now we can move on to the next step. And finally, we can build the module. We may choose to output this as an executable. So click on Build the Server, and of course save it to the location of your choice. Now, where does give it a name? We're going to go ahead and give it a name that's easy for us to understand, but we would never name it this way if we were truly using this as a Trojan in an actual penetration test. All right, so we see that it is finished, and really, for all intents and purposes, there is nothing more to be done. Now, we see the server that we just created with the movie icon and the name that we gave it. And of course, the next move would then be drop this onto a victim's system. Now, you can see that this is a 25 meg file in size because of the video that we used. However, we could have used a smaller picture or a document that would have been easier to send, easier to mail, for example, would have been much easier to distribute. So as we look at the properties, we can see that this is an application and exe. Now, personally, I would recommend that we wrap that with another file or a program that is less likely to raise suspicion so that it is not known as an executable. I notice when we double click on it, of course, we see that the error that we have created. So once you click OK, the victim is now infected with the Trojan, and the Trojan will then connect back to your controller sitting on whatever system you choose, and you're in. All right, Laura, you like new things?
Yes.
Everybody loves new things, right? Well, maybe
Correct.
not when we're talking about Trojans.
Yes.
Now, there is a fairly recent Trojan called zburb, which was assembled from a source code that was leaked from two very well-known Trojans called Zeus and carburp. Now, this new Trojan can perform many functions, and they are varied and very dangerous, such as stealing basic computer information like the computer name, IP address, and domain. It can also actually take screenshots right from your console, steal data from your web forms, your SSL certificates, and account credentials for your email or your FTP site. So pretty much anywhere you keep data, right? Now, it has some really nice optional features that will allow attackers to perform web injections or man-in-the-middle attacks, even set up RDP connections.
And this is a very smart Trojan, and it has what's known as an invisible persistence. When there is a connection to a Windows system, there is a persistence key found in the registry. This malware will delete that registry key during the Windows startup process, which can prevent some security systems from finding it during the system scans. However, it also needs to maintain a connection, so during the shutdown process, this malware will write the persistence key back into the registry so that it's there next time it needs to start. That is an amazing piece of malware, as you can tell. And this Trojan also uses steganography to keep itself hidden, and it will place the configuration code in an image file so that your security solutions are not able to detect it at all.